Record. All right, happy Friday, everybody. Welcome to my session. Today we're going to talk about Revit schedule. So, who's this session for? Hopefully, if you never work with Revit schedule, this is kind of like a quick summary how I would work with Revit schedule. If you never used it, I'm just going to show you a couple tricks that could get you started. And then I also want to show you how to take your schedule and apply it to the other file. So I said here, no experience required. So this is kind of like the basic. Now, how do you tackle schedule? The first thing I always tell user what to do is that what do you want out of your schedule? Then you could take an example. Let's say you have a hard copy of a schedule. All you want to do is that you want to deconstruct it and put that into a parameter inside your Revit. And then later on, you want to view your result, whether the result is what you want. The simplest example I would probably show is the parking count. I know that people tend to do a lot of parking. So what I do here is that the result, you just want to know how many parking stall is in your project. The backbone of the data, it's going to be level, count, and parking type. So parking type, you could be small parking, loading, handicap, and regular parking. Now, in some cases, you guys want to build dummy tags, right? Dummy schedule. So you can just manually enter in. That's basically, you could do it inside Revit, but there's a trick required that you have to build into something into it. I'll show you how to build quickly, but I won't get into too detailed. But if you want to build like this kind of a schedule inside Revit, it is achievable, but it's going to take you a while because you kind of have to look at the schedule based on columns and rows. So this one is like one column here, that's one column there, that's one column, and that's one column. So you kind of have to think ahead before you can able to build this type of a schedule. Now, sometimes what end up happening is that I have a mixed bag of dummy tags with real data. The problem with Revit is that it doesn't allow you to cross-referencing data. Sometimes if they're able to do it in the future release, it will solve all our issues. The unfortunate thing is that sometimes you need to put in a dummy tag, let's say dummy schedule, and then you have to put a real data on top. Like for example, this is a perfect example, like you want to know the square footage of your building, and then the other one is just telling you if you're over or under. Right now, we don't have the ability. Probably in the future, if Revit give us a couple tools that it can reference data directly to other stuff, then yeah, that will help us quite a bit. Everybody knows Revit schedule is not pretty. This is kind of like the example I get out of when I create a new schedule, let's say a room. And what ends up happening is that it's usually sorted based on if it's not placed properly, it's going to say not placed. Okay. Here I'm just going to, later on I'm going to do a room and I show you how you can able to, kind of organize it based on levels or based on names and etc. You can make it sexy. Okay. Yeah, you can make it sexy. But there's other tricks I'm probably going to show you. Okay, let's go to the demonstration. Okay, let's start from the new one. Now, if you ever want to create a schedule, I'm just going to go from creating dummy schedule because everybody wants to know how you create a dummy schedule. So the first thing, if you want to create like a dummy schedule for pretty much anything, I recommend user just create just a new family. Okay. I always use what's known as generic annotation. So in here, you could just draw any objects. I usually just draw a circle. You don't need anything else. Just draw a circle, and you can load it in or save it. I usually just load it in just for sake of time. And in here for annotation, you can always say rename. I'm going to call this table cell. Okay. Now, within this table cell, what you have to do is that you could put it in a drafting view. So what I typically do is that you could put it in drafting view or floor plan, that's fine, but you do not want to put this tag into a legend because it will not get scheduled. So here what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to copy, let's say 2. Okay. Now, what you're going to do next, come on. How do you minimize this? Sometimes this thing's blocking my way. So what you're going to do is that when you click on view, go to schedule, you notice that there is one called note block. Okay, click on that. Currently, there's one called here, and then I'm just going to call myself dummy schedule. And in here, it doesn't have anything. So what you can do here is that you can just put in data. Let's assume that I'm going to do a parking count, right? Parking count. I will put it as an instance parameter and just put a number. And you can just go parking type, text, and you could just create anything you want out of this parking cost. You can associate with currency. Okay, always put it as an instance. Okay, so what ended up happening is that right now you have, I'm just going to put 1, 1, 1, and then I'm going to go back here. Oops, close that. Now, I'm going to go WT. So the minute that I copy this, it will basically create the new role. Okay, you can just keep adding in value. You notice that when I click on here, this data is already in there. So that's probably the quickest way to kind of like build your dummy schedule and just punch in a bunch of numbers. Here, what you can do is set this parking number. You can say count. Okay, when you go into here, no calculate total. And then what you do here is that here you want to go grand total. Just give me everything. And say okay, and you notice that it just basically gives you that. Now, if all the data are the same, what you could do is that you can click on this and say do not itemize every item. Okay, itemize every item means that if you have the same object again and again and again, there's no point of repeating it. So here I could say okay, and it basically flatten everything. Now, once I start to say this one parking type is going to be regular. Okay, and this is going to be small, and then I'm just going to say this is handicap, and this one I'm just going to call loading. So what you could do here is that you could sort it out based on those types. So here, what I'm going to do, let's go into the schedule, go to edit field. Okay, this is where you're going to say, okay, I'm going to sort by parking type and hit OK. You notice that right now it's just giving you this type of count. So that's how you kind of do your thing. So if let's say this data, it's going to be a different one. Let's say this is no longer handicap. This is going to be visitor. Visitor. You notice that that becomes a new one. Let's assume that I want to add levels to this. I'm just going to randomly copy this over. Okay, you notice that right now the number changes. And let's assume that I want to add a level to this. So what you're going to do is you're going to go in here and just add a level. This is just basically a dummy tag, right? I always do this and say level. And you can sort this out. If you press it up, it means that it's going to go up. If it's going to go down, it's going to go down. Okay. Right now you have a level. So here I'm just going to go, this is level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 4. Okay, right now you see that it doesn't sort by anything. The reason why is that you have a mixed bag of different levels. The unfortunate thing is that it's sorted by parking type. So the next thing you want to do in here is you go in here, change to level. Okay. Once you do that, you notice that the parking type is no longer there. So what you're going to do is that the next one, you're going to say parking by type. Say okay. Oh, that looks better. But unfortunately, you notice that there's a lot of repeating element in here. So what you want to do is that you want to basically hide the level by clicking on header. And the next thing you want to do is that you want to just basically hide that field. So you notice that right now it's doing like this. Okay, let me copy all this. Okay, there we go. Now you have 24. So it's going to count it magically as long as this value is parking count 1. So if I say this is parking 4, you notice that basically automatically calculate that. Okay, it's a quick way. I know that some user may not like this kind of a thing, but it's a good way to kind of like put in numbers. So say you want to create a new dummy tag, you want to have control where you're going to have 3 roles like handicap, loading, regular, and what you can say is that you can just fill in the number, blank number. So for user, this is becoming a very useful kind of information. I'm just going to say $1,000. Now, any questions so far with this? It's a pretty straightforward setup. If you want to go really in depth into this, we can do another session like privately if you guys want to. I don't understand how this is done, but I just want to go quickly how you can create a dummy tag. All you need to do is just create a family, put a note block, and then you have your dummy schedule already created. Okay. Yes.
A quick question. Could it go the other way around? Like, for example, if I have some parking file first, all the parking, how do I handicap? Is it possible that I change
Yes, it could work, but this one is just a dummy. I'm just showing you a dummy tag, right? It basically means that what the user is talking about is that right now I'm highlighting this. If you want to change this to regular, yeah, you can slowly do that. You notice that it becomes 4, right? But this one, I would not use it unless you kind of have to do, let's say, a code report where you have to put in figures related to the Excel file. This is how I would do it. But other than that, if you want to do like a real parking, I would use the real thing, not use the dummy. But this one is kind of like illustrating how you can easily create a dummy stuff and then just put together whatever you want. Okay, so there's unlimited resources. The reason why I don't want to use the real object is because the minute you start adding in tags, let's say the field, right? This one, it basically goes to all the parking. So in this particular one, you can just create as many different parameters, and then in the schedule, you could just add in whatever you want. Now, the other thing I forgot to mention is that let's put in a yes and no parameter into this. So let's assume that you want to add in yes and no. So here, I'm just going to go back into here. And the one thing I'm going to do for the yes and no is to say this is going to be existing parking. Okay, I'm going to put an instance parameter. And what it does is that it's going to say yes or no. Let's assume that here I'm just going to randomly just pick. Now, if you put this into a sheet and say here, I'm just going to create a new sheet. You put in the dummy tag. This is what you're going to get, yes and no. Sometimes the user doesn't like that, right? You like to have a dot, right? A dot symbolizes yes, it's a new parking, and then no means don't fill in the blank. So how do you add that parameter into that? So the first thing you want to do is that you go back into this, right? You have this existing. There's a function called these calculated parameter, right? This one. So what you're going to do here is that you're going to put in as a text. Okay, you're going to add in like this is going to, I could just say value again. Here, I'm just going to put in what's called if parking, existing parking, put a value, X, or put a blank. What it means by that is that you're going to replace it with just an X. And then in here, I'm just going to hide this. So what you're seeing inside this dummy schedule is you just basically replacing that yes and no with an X. Okay. Sometimes you can replace it with a dot if you like the dot. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you how to put in a dot. So the first thing you do is call up the character map. You can go as an aerial if you want. Let's see, that's the aerial. And you can find in a dot in here. If it's not, that's fine. Okay, let's go with the wingding. Okay, let's say wingding. That's a good dot. You select it, copy that. And then what you're going to do here is you go into this, go to value, edit that, and copy in this. Okay, it's going to go L. The next thing you're going to do is that you're going to click on the font, click on this, change it to, I think it's wingding, right? I think it's wingding. Okay, and what you're going to do here is that edit this and change it back to Arial. So the header, you want to change it back to Arial. Okay, now what happens is that you have a dot. Okay, that's kind of like my quick trick. Like, how do you change it to dot? Is that you set it to wingding, and then you just basically, yeah, just align it, center. Any questions so far with this? Well, the other value I'm going to add in is that if you want to add in each cell to be, color coded, this is what you do. I'm just going to add in another one called yes and no, and I'm just going to say color instance. Now, the next thing you're going to do here is that for level conditional formatting, you're going to choose color equals to yes. Then you're going to say that's highlighted in pink. Okay. Do the same thing, conditional formatting equal to yes, just pink. Here, conditional formatting, color equals to pink. Okay, you just repeat it depending on how many formats that you, oops, not this one, conditional formatting, color equals to yes. In the old days, this is how we do color, like differences in color. In 2021, you don't have to do this anymore because the Autodesk finally give you the option to add those bar into it. So you no longer need to do this. However, the only problem I have with the conditional formatting is that it's not really doing multiple variations. You can only do yes and no. Okay, you cannot add multiple color, unfortunately. This one we're just going to leave it. Okay, so here, if I check it off, it's going to basically just check up those color. Okay, so if you wanted to really go like really quick, you could say, okay, which one is highlighted, which one's not highlighted, and then you can always hide it. Now, what I typically like to do as a good practice is that if you're hiding anything, I always add in a color. Okay, so that way you can tell the user that this is something that is not supposed to be shown. So if I hide the column, it's hidden. Now, this is the thing is that you can hide unhide all, and I always put in a color coding for this. Okay, just blue. Okay, so it's good practice so that you can say all this, it's not showing up, then I'm just going to hide it. Same thing here, I'm just going to hide it. Any questions so far? Pretty straightforward, right? Okay, this is the first dummy schedule you can create. I'm going to show you another dummy schedule you can create. So the other dummy schedule you can create is using this method. All you have to do is just go to schedule. Choose a schedule that is not impacting your object. So most cases, I usually like to use anything that's not related to architecture. So choose one of those that's like, cable trays or anything that is not related to your field. So air terminal would be a perfect one. So what you're going to do is that once you select air terminal, the next thing you want to do is that you want to put in mark. Okay, just use like one parameter. That's all you need. All right. The next thing you're going to do is that you're going to expand this as far as you want. Okay. The only thing you're going to do in here in the mark is do not show header. That's the one caveat. Okay. What this does is that it just basically hides the schedule. And now what you can do is that you can clear cell and you can start inserting your, inserting your role. You notice that right now I'm just inserting and just say test, 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 and test. Now, if you want to split, you can say, okay, let's see, where's the insert? Insert here. There we go. Insert, insert. Now, if you want to merge, you can say, I want to merge this. I want to merge this. This is how you get this that effect that I've shown you previously, like this, right? If you kind of understand how that was done, it's kind of like you have a row, you just have to calculate how many columns you're gonna have. Okay, at the end you could just say, okay, this one has no columns, so how do you get that effect? So I'm just gonna go back to the Revit side. So in here you can have order. Okay, you can say this one I do not want to show. This one I do not want to show. That one I do not want to show. And what happened is that it just basically hides those stuff. Now, if you want to add in color, you can always go shading and say, okay, just make that shading. So the possibility is endless. This will take time, okay? It's not like right away you're going to get like a perfect schedule out of the whim. So you kind of have to understand how a lot of this stuff kind of handles it. And if you want to add in a new one, you can always insert in. And now what happens is that every time when you do insert, it's just going to do the middle. Whenever it splits, let's say insert, you notice that it always does it in the middle. So if you extend this even further, right, you see that it basically make all the other roll basically expand with that. So here you can just adjust whatever you want. So in here, I would recommend that you get like a perfect number. Here you get 12. Okay. The next thing you want to do here is that, let's say resized, and you know it's a 1.5. Resize, that's 1.5, that's good. And resize 3, that's good. So this is how I kind of like resize it. You want to make it as perfect number as you can so that it makes your life easier. Okay. If you don't do that, sometimes you kind of have to like do this minor adjustment and it becomes a very, very troublesome. Like sometimes you want to align certain objects. Yeah, it becomes really difficult. So this is kind of like how I measure. First, you do the size of this column, or yeah, this column, you just want to say as big as you want. Sometimes you need to be bigger. Now in here, the interesting about the font, now it really depends on what size you put in. So here I could say, let's put in size. Let's say here I want to duplicate and call this table text. And I'm going to make it 5/64 of an inch, which is equivalent to 2 millimeters if you are using metric. Here I want to use, let's say, Arial black. Okay, so that's what it looks like. So in here, for appearances, I always say text. You can say table text. Okay, make them all the same. Okay, that's what it looks like. Now you can manipulate this as well. So you could go in here and say this is going to be 1/8, and it doesn't have to be this. You can make it like, okay, calibrate. You can do that, but however, if your text is all normalized as this guy right here, this will override whatever is in the default. So I always tell user, if you want to do the text in here, always set it up as a table text or whatever text you want, like Arial, 232nd, and the rest, if you want to do like a bold letter, then this is where you customize it. Okay, so when you look at this type of schedule right here, you notice that this is custom. That's probably custom as well. The only thing that's default is this like level 4 321. those are, I always keep it as default as much as possible. Any questions so far with this? Pretty straightforward, right? I hope. All right. So let's move on to the next one. So how do you work with real schedules? So I'm just going to open up a real project just as a demonstration. So I'm just going to use a project that I've saved. Okay, let's say this one. Now, when you do any scheduling in Revit, I always refer back to this, right? Your attention. I always do this. Step one, define what you want and ask what you want. And then now, if you have a picture of the schedule, you want to deconstruct it and select what parameters you want to use. And then later on, verify it and make sure that it's all correct. So those are basically my 3 steps, basically, when you're tackling any Revit schedule. Okay, so here I'm gonna create a new schedule. Let's do a door schedule. I already have a QA/QC. Later on, I'm just gonna explain the method of it. So in here, what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna go into schedule. Okay, everybody should know how to create a schedule just from scratch. So if you don't know, this is the button right here. Okay. If you don't know what schedule to create, I always tell user just go in there and turn off everything that is not your discipline. So I always choose architecture. So that way, basically, filter out all the stuff that's not belong to architecture and just go with simple stuff. So here I'm just going to go to schedule. I'm just going to say door schedule sample. Okay. Now phasing. You just have to know what phase you're in. You could do the future where things, everything is already set, but I always do the phase before the future, which is phase 1. Schedule key. Okay, schedule key is important in some aspect because you can control certain value out of it. This could get very complicated. If you guys really want to know how this is done, I could do that as a separate thing. But for today, I'm just going to show you guys how the mindset going into how to build this. If you have time, we can go back to schedule key and then, yeah, we'll just go from there. And click OK. You will notice that there's a lot of schedule in here. I have no control over what object, what people put into the door schedule. Sometimes people copy from the previous project and they just dump it in here. So the one thing you want to look out for is a couple things. One is level. I would say level is always the most important. The next step you want to do is mark. Okay. Type mark. Okay, the next one you want to put in is the data, whatever data you have in it. Now, most difficult part about figuring out what all this information came from is really depends on what user put into those data. If user put in all this, let's say existing door, frame finish, all that stuff, you can get overwhelmed. So what I like to do in this particular one, if you do any project, always group all the doors with this in mind. Always say first you want to have door. The next thing you want to do is what it is. So it's frame, and then the next one is going to be basically finish, material, and type. So my logic here is that if you have like tons of all this parameter, you do not know which one is what. So the best way I would suggest, if you ever do any door schedule or any parameters, that find the parameter that you think it's going to use, or you can create this from scratch, right? So that everybody can follow the consistency. One thing I always do here is that I always like to put in door, and then there's one called type finish, type mark. Okay, I'm just going to add that in, all type marks. Here, I'm just going to add that in. And then you also want to have width. Width, I'm just going to put it up. Okay, here, you want height, because that's the default parameter. So you're trying to use as much default parameter as you want. So the only thing that you want to put in is the customized parameters like door finish, frame finish, height, door type mark. Now, I also created another one and don't use type mark. The reason why is that sometimes when you have two of the same door, let's say they're both named differently, Revit just hates it when one door is called A, the other one is also called A. So to avoid having all this data clashing, you can resort to create your new one. So here, this is basically a type parameter. I call it door type mark. Okay. You can use the existing default as well. Like I usually for door type mark, I usually use type mark. But the unfortunate thing is that depending on how big your project is going to be, you're not going to achieve the same result because type mark is very case sensitive and it hates duplication. So if you have duplication, I just don't recommend using this. But if you have no duplication, then yes, I recommend using this. Okay, what other parameter? Thickness. Okay, you just put it in here. And let's go ahead. Yes, this is the mess that you're going to get into. So how do you do that? The first thing you're going to do is that you're going to sort. Okay, one thing to remember, you notice that this filter is always show all. Don't do that. Always show to complete or show complete map. The reason why I said don't put a show all is because if the door is demolished, it's going to show up in the schedule. So I always recommend that you don't do that and just put it in. And you notice that previous the schedule kind of did something, right? So just be aware of that because if you show all, it means that whatever it's in existing, it's going to show up. Okay, even if it's demolished. So if you don't want to do that, then I would say show the complete. So the first thing I'm going to do is that here I'm going to go sort by level. Okay. Now, following the same logic as before, I'm just going to put that as a header. And here for the level, I'm just going to hide that parameter. Okay. So what it does is that it gives me this nice consistency of, okay, level 3, level 2, and et cetera, et cetera. Okay. This is how I usually like to see my schedule. Now, the next thing you want to do is that you want to combine width and height. Okay, there is a parameter in here. I'm just going to show you how it's done. You notice that there is one called the combine parameters. Okay, here what you could do is that I'm going to put in width and height. Okay, rather than using the separator, I want to put in an X. Okay, call this like width X height. And here I could just go up. And you can remove this if you want, but I like to put it in there as a parameter so that later on, if you need to call it up, you know exactly what it is. Here, I'm just going to go hide that. So here, hide that and hide that. So what you see is that kind of parameter. Now, if you want to go back there and fix it again, I could always go into the, go to here, edit. You can always add separator. There we go. Now, if you want to make it middle center, okay, that's how you do it. You can, if you want to add thickness on top of it, go ahead. I mean, if you want to do like width, height, and thickness, yeah, you can basically just go in there and just do that. Okay, so type mark. So anything else? So the next step you want to do is that you want this door to relate to where the schedule. I mean the room itself. So the next thing you want to do is you have a filter field. You see that there's a room and two rooms. Okay. What's the difference? Now, two rooms is basically you going to the room, and then from room is basically from the room. I always use from room for some odd reason because it always works out the cleanest, I would say, out of all the parameters. You can use two room. It doesn't matter which one you use. However, if your doors, okay, just keep in mind, if you add in this parameter, I'm just going to go into one of this. I'm just going to turn on my building new, open it. Okay. Okay. So inside your door, there is one. Just remove that. you notice that there is one here called room calculation point. Okay, this will affect your two room from room. So if you click on that, which means that if you flip one or the other, let's say you flip the room, this door will automatically flip back and forth. Sometimes you don't want that to happen. So I'd avoid doing that if you have the room calculation point. So just keep in mind, like some objects that you download from online have this already baked in. So you want to avoid this as much as you can. I always say turn it off. If you see it, turn it off right there. Okay, so you don't have that. Reason being is that if you want to, from room to room, if you want to switch it, the door like handles itself will also flip. So just don't do that. So going back to schedule, here I'm just going to go into the from room. The first thing you want to do is that you want to get the name of the room, okay? And sometimes you want to reference to the number as well, okay? So that you know which number you want it to be in. Oh, actually, let's see, mark. Now, since this is done correctly. So here you notice that there is one called blank, okay? What it means by that is this room only found one room. You notice that here, if I switch it on, it's able to switch between one or the other, okay? Sometimes what you need to do is that you have to go to plan itself. Let's say this is, let's go to L1, okay? And you notice that sometimes it has nothing, okay? You will run into this problem very, very often, okay? So what you're gonna do is I'm gonna show you how to fix this problem. And some of them you have this OP and then it has 0x0, okay? That's a glitch. So what you wanna do is that if you want to eliminate some of the doors, my best bet is that you always add comments, okay, to your parameter. I think the OP, it stands for exclude. Okay, if you want to filter things out, I will always recommend user just adding a comment. And here for the filter, I'm just going to say comment does not equal exclude. Okay, and what that happened is that all the OPs are all gone from here. All right, how do you fix this? How do you change this value so that you accept this? Okay, I have a value. So the first thing you want to do is that you want to set up a number system, okay? For this particular one, I already have a number system already set up. So it's called the room condition value, okay? And then in here for the room condition value, I'm just going to put it up. You notice that there's a lot of zeros and there's 1 and number 2. So what you want to do is that if those room is not found in your schedule, I want it to replace with something else. You can do it with the schedule. It's much better than trying to figure out where this room is located. So let's assume that this room, I'm just going to highlight it and see where it is. Oops, it could be in concourse. Oh, I see. Okay, so this number 2 is right here. I'll show you where it is. Okay, it's like right over there. Okay, this is how you kind of go QA/QC, is that you select the door, go to 3D, and it will just highlight the door. Okay, it's a quick, easy part. You can select that. Unfortunately, if you do that and go back to schedule, it will not highlight that. That's the unfortunate thing. But so what you have to do is that you just highlight this, go to 3D, and then it just select that object. So that's how I kind of tell where's my object before I go in and dive deeper. So for this one, it doesn't have a room. Let's see if this one has a room. Nope, this one doesn't have a room. So let's see where this is at. Oh, right there. Okay, it's right there. The unfortunate thing is that sometimes, depending on what doors you're in, you notice that there is a room there, but it doesn't pick up that room bounding information. Sometimes it could be depending on how this door is built. This is from a manufacturer door. So I have no control what they do with their door. So when you put it in, sometimes it does not record or register anything. So how do you fix this problem? So what I have is that you have to go in here, okay, create a new one called the add calculated parameter. So in here, you're going to put in as a text, and then I'm just going to call this room override value. Now I created a formula. I'm just going to showcase what the formula is. So here I just create one for the numbers and the name. Yeah, it could get very big. So in this one, I'm probably going to share it online if you guys really want to get into this. Okay, so that you can use this, copy it. So this one, what I did is I just created a formula with like 57 conditions. So you can have 57 different rooms to kind of muck around. If you want to add more, the only thing you have to do is that you just copy this value and just keep adding on, but you have to make sure you add, let's say, for example, if you want to add the next one, 58, all you have to do is just copy it and paste it here, right? And then you just add in the next one. That's pretty much it. For this one, I'm just going to keep it simple, don't touch anything. So in this particular case, I say if the room condition is 1, I'm going to force it to call itself stair number 1 SGG. If the room condition is number 2, it's going to be this particular value. So basically, you tell Revit to force that value into that. Okay, I'm just going to close out of this. So what you're going to do is that just go in there. Yep, you can copy. It's in the project already, right? But this one is kind of like if you want to do it for, let's say, a future project, this is exactly how the process I will do is that if the room itself doesn't register, okay, then you just go in here and see what number you want to put in. So if let's say number 1 is this, I'm just going to leave it as it is. If you want to do number 2, then it's going to repeat to that. So here I'm just going to copy that value, okay, and then just paste it here. And see, okay. So here I'm just going to put close to that room name, okay. And here I'm just going to color code it. Okay, I'm just going to color code it so that you get differences. Now, if I ever want to change certain value, let's say this one's 27, you see that it just changes that value. So let's say this is 31. Okay, so this is the value that it's going to read, but this one's also going to pick up from the existing room. So if I put it back to 0, now why would I do 0 is because if you ever want to change this to something else, say this janitor, to this, you see that this one automatically picks that up. Okay, so that's the reason why I leave it as it is 0, so that whatever you choose, it's going to pick up this value. Okay, so this is just basically picking up this, except you have this condition value. I always add in a color to this as well. So you know that this is not something you should print. Okay, so here's number 2, it's going to be existing, and here's number 2, it's going to be calling that. Now, the next thing you want to do is the same way how you do the number. I already have this baked in, so I'm just going to do it. Again, it's the same condition. If room condition value is 1, it's going to be this number. If it's this, that number, etc. And then you just copy that whole formula. You're going to go in, click on this text, say this is room number override. Okay, I'm not too fussy about this. Okay, you can always call it like just give it a very generic name, but don't call it like D1, D2. Sometimes what end up happening is that user doesn't understand what it means inside this. I always seen a couple people, you know, sometimes they could go crazy with the naming. Just be aware. Just make it very, very clear so that user do not get confused. Okay, and you don't have to put it all like cap letters. Okay, one of the most annoying thing I've seen so far is that people add in parameters to all caps, and then what end up happening is that they're all caps. Do we have it here? Oops, excuse me. It's probably URL. Okay, this is good because sometimes what end up happening is that when user starts to create a parameter, what end up happening is that they add in all caps, and that gets very annoying because what I what I said is that here you can also override. You can always say reset or clear. I think it's clear cell. And here you can just override it with whatever value you want. Let's say this is a room name, room number. And the funny thing is that it will not impact. You see that room name, room override, room, which one? Room number override. You see that room number? It does not affect that. So just keep in mind, because this is independent from this. All right, so you could say this is room number. Oh, this is door number, sorry. Door number. And then if you want to hide stuff, then I'll just say hide column, hide column, hide column, etc. Okay, here I'm just going to pick this. Now, if you want to group stuff, this is how I do it, is that you highlight this and you say group it. Then you can say this is door location, or door. Yeah, let's say door location for now. And then here, if you want to say size, you group it, call it size. And if you have other value, let's say this one, group it. And this is going to be basically door MISC. Okay. So that's how you do groups. Now, if you want to do the overall group, you can also highlight this and group one massive group. So grouping is just be aware. Okay, it exists. So how do you ungroup it? Is that you first have to highlight that and say ungroup. You notice that it goes back. Same thing here. Just go back. Just be aware it exists, and this is how you create. So sometimes what ends up happening is that when you unhide this, you notice that sometimes you have this, location, and then you have this in the middle. Just keep in mind that that's what happens. I'm just gonna, oops, undo. Okay. Now for colors, sometimes what people wants to do with a color is that you can go in here and click on shading and just change that. And change that as well. Sorry, you guys got a question? No? All right. Here you can always go clear cell, okay, and then put in your own value. So here I'm just going to say door schedule template. And then here what I'm going to do is that it's going to have, let's see, 5 millimeter. It's going to be bold. Okay. And that's basically the gist of how you create your door schedule. Now I should go into the QA/QC so you kind of see what kind of a door that I've created for this one. So this particular one, I have multiple doors from different links. So what I did is that my first column is just link. And this particular door, what I did is that you see that there's a room conditioner value that basically override this particular one, this information. If I set 2, you notice that it's going to say that. Now, this is interesting because I added in just to a parameter saying that if this is an existing door or not. If it has an existing door, it would change those value. You notice that here, I never put in a whole bunch of information. If it is an existing door, what's the point of populating those stuff? You can go in there and manipulate saying that they're all existing. So what I did here is that if there is an existing value, all this door, call all of this finish, everything's all existing. So that's what I did. That's what happens. And then here, you notice that there is a yes and no. You notice that here I can just go check on and off, right? So if you guys really want to not use yes and no, and then add this one, this is how you do it. I think I probably showed it earlier how to create that symbols. Any question with this? No. All right. Hi. Go ahead. That's correct. Yep, that's also very true. So if you have links here, I'm just going to load a link just to show you guys. Yeah, because what happened is that sometimes link would not pick up your door values, unfortunately. Uh, it will pick it up if you add duplication door inside your family. Oops. Where is it? Okay. So here I'm just gonna open up the one of the links just to give you guys some example what is going on. What tends to happen is that for rooms, you want the rooms to be in the central model. Unfortunately, some doors exist in the link, and you don't put any doors, any rooms in there. And what end up happening is that Revit sometimes may not pick up those information unless you have a room in that particular file. My caveat with that is that you're going to have a lot of duplication of rooms data, and that sometimes could be very, very difficult to kind of deal with, especially when you do the QA/QC portion. So the best way to do this is to trick Revit to think that this is the value that you're going to use. You notice that right now, what I have is that here I just put in numbers, and then you just basically pick up all those information. Most cases, you're not going to have rooms, so the best way I would suggest is just using that manipulation, and then you just basically feed in whatever numbers you want to put in. Now, there is some limitation to this. This will only works with if it's a text, it will read text. If it's like, let's say you have a right? If you have a distance and then you want to change it to a text value, it will not allow you to do that. So for instance, if your door have, let's say, this particular value, and then you want to basically put it as a text saying that see site, okay? That Revit just, oh, really? Okay. Anybody see that? Did people see it? Resume sharing. Not yet. You see it? Let's say share. Okay, you share? See it? Okay. Okay. The problem with the this field, the what do you call it? This formula has a limitation. So if your original value is length, it will not pick it up as a text. Revit just does not allow that. I wish there's a way, but no. So far, there's no way. So what you have to do is that if you ever have like where you say, okay, for this particular scenario, I want this to say something else, like width and height to be, see site, right? You kind of have to add in another parameter, which is just a text space, and you just manually enter in. And that sometimes could be a daunting task, right? So you kind of have to make sure you understand the scheduling itself. Revit does not like to mix and match text with this length. So just keep in mind, Revit does not do this, okay? If you want to see site, I recommend use the comment, okay? That's the only thing, the caveat with this site. Let's assume that this one is a bogus number. Just leave it as it is, but just tell them, see site dimension, okay? There's nothing much you can do with the length. Hopefully in the future, Revit will able to allow you to do that, but right now, no, there's no way. Looks like I got 5 minutes before I get booted out. Now, for key schedule. So what key schedule does? Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go in and just create a key schedule just to demonstrate what it does. So let's assume that each person has to do a lot of like data entry, manual data entry, okay? That could waste a lot of time. So what I'd like to do is that, let's say this is a key schedule. Okay, key schedule. And let's say this is a door hardware schedule. Let's go hardware schedule. So here, what you could do is that Revit allows you to pick whatever parameter, but it has to be an instance parameter. So here I could say door finish, door frame type, finishes. It can be core, closer, key contact. You know, it has to be a instance parameter. It cannot be a type parameter, unfortunately. So here, what you can do is that once you have this particular, once you're in here, what you can do here is that you want to add a value. Okay, so here I'm just going to say key schedule. How do I add in a new one? New. There we go. Yeah, this is why sometimes I don't like Revit. It's that they make things very inconsistent, right? So here, if you want to add a new, you can say give it a name. Okay, key name. You could say this is going to be a type 1. So make sure you kind of give an example. What is type 1? Okay, type 1 is basically closer. For example, you say HM, and then you can say finish is like blah blah blah, and then you can say this is a closer, and then you can say check off, and then if you insert a new role, type 2. This one is just say blah blah blah. And then you can say whatever you want, whatever you want, whatever you want. So basically, it just gives you more option. So once you have this data entered in, then what you could do here is that for the door itself, you could go into this key schedule, which I created. Make sure you know the name. Hardware key. What did I call it? There we go. You see that this one, door hardware schedule? It's closer. You notice that some of those data is going to get grayed out. Okay. I only use this if you have a lot of instance parameter and you know that this door is going to be variations of stuff. So I would do this only if your door is instance parameter. If it's a type parameter, don't bother with this. Okay. The previous one I did is that my frame it's a type parameter. My door type is type parameter. So this is not valid. But this is for, like, let's say if you're doing a hardware schedule, this is a very important thing. So you could go in there and say whatever you want, those values. Any questions so far? Well, that concludes the presentation. I'll probably work with you guys on the hardware schedule. If you really want me to go deep dive into this, yeah, it could get very, very deep if you want to get into this. But hopefully in the future, I'll do the version is called the FSR kind of a thing. You can actually pick doors relate to, let's say, a bunch of, let's say, unit type as well. I mean, you could go very, very deep with this key schedule. All right. Thank you for attending the session. Hopefully this has been useful for you guys. If you guys have any questions in the future, just let me know. Thank you.